I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 28, 2019, and the time is 7 o'clock p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were some items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, you had some personnel items, including some appointments, increase and decrease and change in assignment. We did have one gift agreement. And then we've also included a boys alpine skiing cooperative agreement with Red Wing for just a couple of students.
Okay. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Ellen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed? Sorry, motion carries. The agenda is approved. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board?
I would.
Okay. If you would allow me a moment here to read the guidelines for public comment. I'd like to remind the public that this is a listening opportunity for the board and not a time to debate an issue. Also, the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act prohibits comments about specific student matters even without naming the student in open session. This includes the public comment portion of our meeting. The board respects and values input on student matters, but when it relates to a specific student or to a specific student matter, such input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, such as the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. So with that being said, you are in position at the podium, so please identify yourself by stating your name and address, and if you represent a group, and we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Welcome.
My name is Carissa Grothy, 4450 100th Street East. I am representing myself and my family, and I would like to address Tom. You're not a victim, Tom. You created conflict for yourself by upsetting people in our wonderful community. I completely believe in and I encourage freedom of speech, and nobody wants to take that from you. The problem is you do not have a filter that tells you to stop or even to think about another person or what they are expressing. You do not seem to understand that your seat on the Northfield School Board puts you in a position of public service, and it appears you are only into serving yourself and your own opinion. You are not considering how this is going to impact the Northfield School Board and its relationship with parents and the community. This has made many parents aware that we are not paying attention to you or the other school board members. I promise you we are watching now. School board elections are coming up next year, and I believe the community needs to engage and to stop blindly checking boxes. I am taking it upon myself to make sure the 4 people voted for in 2020 will represent our entire community, not just a small corner. Our community is diverse in many ways, and we all deserve to be respected and represented by our school board. Tom, I would like to address your social media activity, or what you call freedom of speech. You are extremely rude and combative to people on Northfield happenings about the roundabout, and you do not even live near there. You attack parents of children who will be most affected by the decision made, and you are not considering safety of children. When I was commenting on Northfield happenings about the lack of services for kids with reading and writing disabilities in our district, you were defending your freedom of speech and took the debate to climate change. Not a single word about solutions or ideas to help children in our school district, just attacks and then climate change. I want to let you know that I'll be having a meeting with Matt Hillman very soon to discuss solutions, because our district is lacking help for the 20% of students that have this. Fixing it can help achieve a goal for our school district by closing the education gap for 20% of Northfield students. But Tom, my problem with you is that freedom of speech and climate change were your priorities, not my Northfield Public School student. When a parent in our district posted on Northfield happenings about illegally parked cars at Carleton College football game, and a child was almost hit by a car, you argued with parents and community members for over 24 hours, defending your employer, Carleton College, not the Northfield Public School student who was nearly hit by a car. Illegally parked cars make it very difficult to cross safely, especially for a child. But you thought it was no big deal. It was a sunny day, adjust your driving, and how old was the child? You had no concern for the students in Northfield Public Schools. You were only defending your employer, Carleton College.
I'm sorry, but you have spoken for 3 minutes, and that is our time limit for public comments. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to announcements and recognition. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I have several announcements this evening. First, we'd like to congratulate junior Nicole Tiberath, who has earned a trip to the state cross-country meet on Saturday, November 2nd. So we're so proud of Nicole. That's quite an honor to advance to the state cross-country meet. And the girls team placed 5th in section 1AA, and our boys team finished 10th. We want to congratulate our girls swim and dive team. They have 2 pieces of hardware that they brought home recently. They won the Big 9 Conference Championship this past weekend in Rochester, and they also, a couple of weeks ago, won the True Team section meet and will advance to the state meet in the next couple of weeks here. We also want to congratulate our juggernaut Northfield Raider volleyball team. They won the Big 9 Championship. They went undefeated in the conference, and even more impressive, if you understand volleyball, they play it's a best of 5 sets. They did not lose 1 set in conference play, so they won every match in conference play 3-0. They're ranked in the nation, and tomorrow night they play in the section semifinals versus Lakeville South. We want to alert people that we start our fall high school play this weekend, a wonderful production called Little Shop of Horrors. Of course, it was a Broadway hit for years. That event is November 1st and 2nd. That's this Friday and Saturday. The 8th and 9th, the following Friday and Saturday. And that is a start time of 7:30. There is one matinee on Sunday, November 10th at 2 p.m. And as you know, our high school actors and actresses work very hard, really starting in August, and they get a couple of weekends to show their stuff, so we hope that the community will come out and support them. And then finally, this announcement is for board members, just reminding you that the annual Bus Driver Appreciation Breakfast is being held tomorrow, October 29th at Bridgewater Elementary from 8:20 to 9:15 in the Bridgewater cafeteria. Board members are invited to attend, and as you know, Bridgewater Principal Nancy Antoine puts on the smorgasbord every year at this time for our bus drivers, and I think that that is well-deserved recognition. And of course, they also have the kindergartners write them cards, and it's a very fun event. So if you're able to make it tomorrow morning, that would be wonderful. And with that, those are the announcements for this evening.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any other comments? Jeff?
I would just like to recognize honorable mention for an alumni. It was a classmate, Steve Paulson, the coach. You got a lot of press here lately on this, but he's retiring as the coach of the Edina girls team, and I believe it's 28 years that he's been there. It's 23 years, state champion, girls tennis. Steve was also very good in tennis at Northfield, and also a Division III All-American at the school up the hill there at St. Olaf. So congratulations to Steve for all his years at Edina. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Jeff. Any other additions board members want to make? Okay, well, thank you. So we'll move on now for our first item for discussion and report, and we're always pleased to welcome Sal Bagley from Wold Architects and Senior Project Manager Josh Cooper from Knudsen Construction, here with exciting updates. Welcome, Sal and Josh.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent Hillman. Thank you for having us. So we are here to give an update on all of the projects. We're going to focus on a schematic design update for the Longfellow and Greenville renovations. And then Josh is going to roll into a little bit of a construction update towards the end of the presentation. Feel free to interrupt or with questions all along the way. We'll focus on one project and then can pause for questions and then the other. So just to remind everybody, what we've been doing with the last couple of meetings is we're going through what we call the core planning group for both of these projects, Longfellow and Greenvale. And that's really a representative group of stakeholders who really help set the vision and direction for the project. So each group has met a couple of times, so I do have a slide on each of that. And just to remind people of the many phases of the project, we've been in schematic design. So the goals of schematic design are getting the pieces in the right location by working with the core group, and it has been a lively debate at both projects to get the pieces in the right place. So we're excited to bring those to you. After that, we move into design development, whereas we really move from 2D to 3D. We're working on getting user group meetings scheduled as we speak, thinking some will be next week and then the rest will be the following week, so that we can get all the information to get documents put together for contractors to bid off of. So I'll start with the Longfellow renovation design. Won't read everybody's name, but I do have the core planning group members' names up here on the slide. We had a significant number of people involved, as there are many departments involved with the district office renovation at Longfellow. And they met 3 times, so twice in September and once in October. Here's the Longfellow site for those who might not be familiar. And really the referendum scope at a high level is to add additional parking to support the district office functions that will be hosted there, as well as continue to support the ALC that operates out of this building. And then really to renovate some existing classroom and office spaces for district office functions. So as with all the other projects, we worked with the core planning group before figuring out solutions to write guiding principles and design criteria. So I'll kind of hit the highlights on some of these as they are lengthy. But always having a focus on the building being safe and secure while being warm and welcoming, which is an interesting concept to work out at Longfellow given the different users that are going to be in the building and having multiple entrances on different levels. An importance on having equitable opportunities for natural daylight. Trying to separate ALC students from district office operations to limit interruptions of either group. The office suite should include opportunities for flex or soft seating for collaboration. The maintaining of the original character of that building while also supporting the collaborative culture of the district office. So finding that balance. Making sure the district office can be secured after hours, and to make sure that any storage or materials that need to remain private can be secured. And make sure to minimize the loss of green space for the ALC with that parking expansion. So those were the design, or the guiding principles, which are really more the subjective statements about the atmosphere, the mission of the project. Design criteria are really about adjacencies. So I won't go through all of these because you all probably know it better than we did. But the first task is we had to go kind of department by department and figure out individual design criteria for HR and for finance and nutrition and how many people work in that department, and of those people who need private offices or space to meet with people, and who might be in a workstation in an open collaborative environment. So there's a couple slides of tracking everybody who's going over to this building. And then the design criteria. So making sure the main reception has space for 2 people who will interact with visitors and really create that welcome center. The use of card readers along doors along the hallway to prevent access as needed. Existing cubicles being reused as those were recently purchased, so we've been designing around those. Having HR, finance, nutrition, and buildings and grounds near each other, as those are critical aspects of operations, and they have a lot of synergy being near each other and operating near each other, while teaching and learning, special services, assessment, tech, and the superintendent have I'll say synergy by being near each other, the instructional suite. And you'll see in the plan when we get there, everybody actually was able to be near each other. So at one point we were exploring a different solution that had people on different sides of a hallway. But I think Dr. Hillman so wonderfully quoted the one big happy family floor plan is where we landed. So while we do have these 2 criteria, it's really everybody's quite close in the floor plan that the core planning group landed on. And spent a lot of time talking about what does access to natural daylight mean in this building. So the criteria of having windows and access to natural light for everybody, so private offices to all have windows, and then making sure daylight harvesting can get to the center of that building, and including cutting in a couple windows where there are not some now. A clear path to visitors for the boardroom, which will be an exciting feature for you all to have a dedicated space that can hold the number of visitors you often have. So needing to accommodate up to 50 people at some times, and then being able to split into multiple rooms for training. And then a couple other miscellaneous things about how many people the staff lounge needs to support, some records and storage, and then a high priority on conference spaces of various sizes. So ranging from small all the way up to large, but a noted lack of medium-sized conference spaces. Okay, so we'll get into the bubble diagram here. So for those who are not familiar, North is on the left-hand side of this page. So this is the lower level of Longfellow. You can see some of the existing support spaces are in light gray, the boiler room, the mechanical room, custodial. And there are 3 classrooms where you can see staging, staff development, and boardroom currently. So the proposal is to keep the first classroom for a staging space, as that's where receiving and deliveries will come in and out of the building, out of those north doors, as well as develop a sound booth for control of the boardroom, so for videotaping and audio control, and then to take the 2 classrooms next door and really to create a boardroom, and you'll see a zoom in of that on a following slide. And then across the hall, a space that has access to natural daylight being prioritized for the staff dining space. And now we get on to the main level. So it's on the bottom of the page here, but it actually faces west. Is the main entry to the building, or what will be the main entry to the district office. It is between the 2 orange boxes that are labeled work and reception. So just as with all the rest of your buildings, people will come in and go through a secure procedure, being checked in and their needs triaged and identified before being let into the building. That's where those 2 workstations will be housed, as well as a drop-in office for families who are coming to enroll their students or maybe have a quick conversation with somebody from the district office. And if we keep going, what is actually south, this is there's actually 4 classrooms and a hallway there right now, which is what's being proposed to become the district office. So you can see private offices along the east and west, and we'll zoom into exactly what those are on another slide. With the interior of the space being some storage, a medium-sized dedicated conference room, some flexible areas, and then workstations that support the various functions of the district office. And that can all be locked off at the hallway while allowing for lots of openness within the suite itself. On the other side of the hallway, so if we keep going counterclockwise, a couple small offices that are currently used to become a conference room and a badging station. So for staff who come, new staff or staff who need a replacement badge can come get a badge made. And then there are 3 classrooms along the west side of the building, so bottom of the drawing, that are all labeled training rooms, which will really help support the high demand for conference and meeting space district-wide. So those are each about the size of a classroom. And for those who might not be familiar, the ALC's gym is also on this floor, so you can see that. So if we zoom into the diagram, a bubble diagram of the office suite for the district office functions, you can start to see the different departments and their important adjacencies that we talked about during the criteria. So along the top of the diagram, which would face east, would be the 2 offices for special services, tech, teaching and learning, assessment, and then Superintendent Hillman's office. In the center of the space here there, where there's the kind of the white blobs, I'm going to call them, is area for flex or drop-in work, or perhaps if you're waiting to meet with somebody who's in one of the offices, some place to work at your laptop. With associated workstations in the center there, you can see that they correspond to their department. And then on the bottom half of the diagram, which faces west, showing another drop-in office for if a private conversation needed to be had, having direct access to that could also serve as a small conference room. And then buildings and grounds, nutrition, finance, and HR. Again, seeing that medium-sized conference room that's critical to functions in the center of the space. And then the badging and large conference across the way. A couple other things you'll see on here. There's a staff entry that faces the parking lot, so you can see that's denoted here. That's the door that ALC staff and current early childhood staff use today. But there's an exploration of trying to make a student entry on that it'll be the southeast door of the stair tower there by use of badging. Of special interest to the board might be the proposed boardroom layout. So we haven't done user group meetings yet to determine exact furniture layout or power and technology requirements, but after exploring many layouts and possible locations, the core group landed on the idea of trying to minimize blocking of viewing for the columns, and also trying to maximize the amount of seating, and to have kind of natural places to have projection and presentation. So the board table being in the upper right-hand corner of the room seemed to make a lot of sense, had very few sightline issues, and there are 2 doors into the proposed boardroom along the hallway. So if somebody were to arrive late for a meeting, they wouldn't walk and directly be on camera, or kind of walk right into the board table. So again, we will be doing user groups for this in 2 weeks. So then I'll move into some. Oh
I'm
yes,
sorry,
of course.
Could we interrupt
Of course.
you for a second, as I know
Yes.
you had indicated?
Where would the screen be?
So I think we'll probably land on that in the user group process, but the core group had a vision for being able to have monitors on both what would be the top, or that's the east wall, so the very top of, and then perhaps along the south wall as well, so that wherever you are in the audience. Another idea was you could also have some monitors on that central column, either facing the audience or actually facing back towards the board. So trying to just have logical sight lines. So a topic of much discussion was the idea of how do we get daylight to everybody within the district office. So this is what we call an axon diagram. It's like the floor above was taken off, and we're kind of looking down into the proposed office suite. So after lots of discussion, the group landed on the idea of prioritizing privacy while allowing for daylight to pass through to the center of the space. And so after looking at several options, the core group selected what we call the transom option. So starting at about 5.5 or 6 feet, it'd be solid wall down, but glass from there to the ceiling, because the windows on the outside of that building are quite tall, and light will be able to come in to the center of the building while still allowing for, if you had a meeting at a small table in your office, to have some privacy. And they also landed on the idea of having some glass in the door. So just again, that will have a dramatic impact on the feel of the space. So we had them evaluate that. And just some incredibly early 3D views. So I think in this we're sitting at proposed Anita's space with Superintendent Hillman's door on the foreground here on the right, and looking at what that transom glass could look like along the perimeter offices. Before I move on to Greenville, any questions in particular or comments? We have lots of people here who were on the core planning group.
Board members, any questions or comments?
I can go back to the plan, might be the best thing.
I think we're good. Unless Matt.
I just want to point out, one of the things that we're trying to look at here is creating what I would call a mini student marquee with that student main entry for the ALC. And we are working through the concept of where, right now they just enter the regular building, with all of the other pieces, and we know how proud the ALC is. So trying to have an actual area learning center, what I call a mini marquee above that door, which is on the southeast side. And then we're working with buildings and grounds where area learning center students would actually get an access card where they'd be able to let themselves into that door, which takes them right upstairs to the area learning center. So it would separate the traffic coming into the building itself and providing students, of course, time restricted access, but I think we could make it feel like a person was really going to the area learning center as opposed to coming to this other building where the area learning center is part of. So I think that was something we were pretty excited about, creating an identity, yes.
Ellen, you had a question.
Yes?
So just help me understand, so that this, possibly having this for the ALC students, and then the staff would come in, and then there'd still be the secure entrance for visitors, which is what was already in place?
Correct.
Okay.
Anytime a couple programs are mixing the same building, we have to kind of think through the multiple hours of operation, and when somebody comes and they don't know who they're there to see, what door do we want them to come through, so there was a lot of discussion about that. Was there another question? Yeah.
Yeah, so is there parking for the ALC students?
Yes, so there's some existing parking, and we're trying to get maybe up to 20 additional spaces, so we're working through layouts right now. So we reviewed the number of staff at the ALC and the number of students who typically drive, as well as the number of people who are currently at the district office or elsewhere who are going to be coming. And then also taking into account the functions that are currently there that take up parking namely early childhood and early ventures, that won't be. So trying to make sure we have a net add of 20 spots. So.
Good question. Jeff?
I actually went there up through third grade.
Okay.
And one of the things too,
Resident
I
expert.
think that, I mean, how well a building that is. I mean, and I think it's still one of the most efficient buildings we have in the school district, isn't it? So when we do some upgrades and things on that, as far as the high back or anything else, I mean, we'll be able to make it more efficient, or what are your comments on that?
Sure. So the building has had quite a bit of investment from a mechanical perspective recently, but it is planned in tandem with long-term facilities maintenance funding to replace the windows, which will have a marked improvement on energy efficiency and occupant comfort, to be real honest. But so mechanically, the systems are already pretty efficient, and we'll just be rearranging ductwork and probably adding VAV boxes to, whenever we take a classroom and cut it up into multiple small offices, we have to add additional controls. But the windows will certainly make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Amy?
Yes.
So I'm still interested in the main student entry.
Yeah.
Is that a stairways that goes up to the second floor, or?
It does, yep. So you come in, there's actually doors on both sides, so I'm only pointing with an arrow to one of them. So that's the parking side. So there would be a card reader put on that door, and then the stairs lead directly upstairs to the ALC.
So there would be no entry into the office at all?
Correct. Yep. So we have to maintain, there are currently doors out of those 2 classrooms into that stairwell, and we'll need one to be an exit only from the district office, but it won't be an entrance. We may choose to put a card reader on that for district office staff, but.
And with the card readers, can you limit hours that people have access to it?
Yes. Yep. So I think the intent is for students to have a certain windows of time in which that's permitted. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeff?
And maybe a few comments on the landscape, maybe redesign, what's going to that look like, and playground?
Oh, sure. And let me pop back to the site plan. So the intent is for the playground to no longer be located at this building. So with the additional parking, the group did have a priority on not or minimizing loss of green space to the ALC. So they currently use a practice field. It's kind of a short practice field, but that runs north-south presently. So the intent is with the expanded parking to try to rotate that field to run east-west. So we get additional parking, but we can take over the area that's currently playground. So we're really just moving that field that they use for physical education. I don't know if you had other specific comments.
Well, just general, trees and shrubbery and things like that, just to spruce it up and make it look better, if that's anything in the budget.
There hasn't been anything currently identified, but any areas of concern?
Well, some of the trees out front, it kind of look a little bit shabby, I think. But that's something down the line, or maybe could even be handled under maintenance.
Sure.
Ellen?
Yes.
So I just can't recall, it sounds like the intent was that the ALC spaces pretty much just stay as they are, that there isn't a big impact on, I can't remember where they have their, the kitchen that they do for the backpack and things like that. Is that all on the second floor?
All on the second floor, and the Area Learning Center will get some additional space on the second floor right now. There is it's a classroom-sized room that is used to house some of our district-wide itinerant staff. So people who, like an occupational therapist who works throughout the building, and so those individuals are planning to move to the renovated Greenbelt Park space to be with the early childhood program. So the Area Learning Center is going to get one additional space on that top floor. And Daryl was part of our core planning group to make sure that the ALC had a voice in how that worked. And a very good participant.
Great questions. Other questions? Amy?
So does that mean everyone's getting a new paint job or anything like that? Because once you start painting one area, then everything else looks worse than it did.
Yeah, so I don't believe the second floor has a ton in it in fact it has 0 in it for the renovation. Really the work would be on the first floor.
Yep. So we're working to focus the referendum dollars on to get the most bang for your buck. So if you take that same budget and try to dilute it over the entire square footage, we can't make much major change. So we're trying to focus in on areas that need reconfiguring. But I'm certain there's areas where we're touching walls that we'll have to paint a little bit further to avoid exactly what you're talking about. I will say in my experience, the building has been very well maintained, and so I don't think it'll look drastically different from new to old. I think there's been a lot of investment over time.
And that's something that can be taken care of over time.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a plan to address painting over a period of time. We do a little bit each summer, and so that would be part of the long-term facilities maintenance revenue program.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks, Val, we can move on.
Gotta fast forward. Okay, so on a similar timeline, we've been meeting with the Greenville Park core planning group for their renovation. So here's the names of all the participants of the Greenville Park core planning group, and they met 3 times and developed criteria, and I believe after lots of discussion, we landed on a solution that's going to work for everybody. One unique thing about this building is it's lots of programs that are not currently under the same roof coming together under the same roof. So we really had to talk through hours of operation and what's it mean when an early ventures parent comes versus when a hand-in-hand parent comes, and what does that mean for security and who checks them in. And so lots of discussion and lots of moving around, even as recently as our last core planning group meeting. So here's obviously Greenville Park before the new building gets put on it, just to remind people. And then we obviously had to get the core planning group caught up to speed with the site plan for the new Greenville Park, because there is some changes for the existing building, namely the closing of one of the curb cuts along Lincoln Parkway and adding striping for parking along what is the current drop-off. So there's angled parking on both sides of that to increase the amount of parent parking for those coming and going activities for early childhood and early ventures. That would then flow into the lot that will be between the 2 buildings, which functions very similar to the way it does today, but it's basically 180 degrees rotated. So the buses will park along a curb line that faces the new elementary school, and staff parking to support the existing Greenville will be in that parking lot. So obviously we had to educate them about those decisions. This is just the referendum diagram, but really the scope from the referendum was to do renovations to convert for use as an early childhood, early ventures, and community ed programming, and some other community partners. And we also need to do some renovations to create a secure vestibule. So those were kind of the key themes, but how we did it is really how the core planning group focused their efforts. Again, guiding principles, focusing on being safe and secure while being warm and welcoming. This is many people's first introduction to the district are these programs, so that was a high priority of that visitor experience. And similarly, the idea that the programs within the building should be located for ease of access and wayfinding. So if you're going to have multiple programs within the same building, we needed to make sure it was clear for people and intuitive, and those people who might be coming and going a lot, not being in the back corner and things like that. And that there should be a separate entry for early ventures that uses fingerprint reader access, which is how you currently handle that program at Longfellow. So for design criteria, we talked about that the secure entry vestibule needs to be larger to accommodate more visitors and circulation space. It's a pretty small vestibule currently. The main office needing to accommodate 4 workstations in that reception area. The community education, so the adult basic education classrooms being directly near the main entrance, so those people are coming and going at different hours than the rest of the younger students within the buildings. There needs to be a variety of conference room sizes to support operations, so small, medium, and large, and in particular thinking about IEP meetings that happen very frequently with your ECSE programs. A separate workroom from a staff lounge, and how many people that staff lounge should be able to hold. So then a couple other important adjacencies. So early ventures, which is your all day care, your hand-in-hand preschool, and early childhood special education, ECSE, if possible being located near each other, as some students access one or more of those programs within the same day. Might go to hand-in-hand preschool for part of the day and then spend the rest of their day in early ventures or something like that. While ECFE, community education, and the CAC should be near each other, as people might access those services as kind of a one-stop shop. ECFE in particular, being located within the building, so they are easy to access for families, as parents often have 1 or 2 children with them, and so didn't want to be a long walk. And those are often shorter classes as well. An area within the building to do large trainings or meetings. kitchen to remain as is for future programming flexibility, as students who are there all day will eat in that facility. Food may or may not be prepped on site. And one of the ideas that emerged towards the end of the core planning group's work was the idea of developing a parent or a family lounge. So if people are there before and after class, a couple core planning group members mentioned that when you're a young parent, that might be how you meet other young parents, and people often linger. So having access to books and other resources, maybe some place for students to blow off some steam. So that was an important criteria. And then there's some, I'll call it technical information. So Early Ventures has some very regimented requirements about room sizes and access to sinks and restrooms. So we just wanted to make sure that the rooms that they're placed within met those things, as well as just a recognition that the infant room and young toddler rooms, those are students that take naps many times throughout the day and may or may not cry sometimes. Everybody in the building might cry sometimes, but they might be more prone to it, so having some acoustical isolation.
Every weekend.
As soon as I said it. The ECSE classrooms needing to be enclosed and have some acoustic separation for students with those needs, as well as being near a bathroom with access to changing space. And then a couple other resources they would benefit from being by a dedicated motor room and a sensory calming room. Okay, so these again there's I think 7 slides of these space needs by program, which is what we took a lot of time with the core planning group, because imagining who all is coming in this building, how many rooms they need to take up, how many staff they might have, and what hours they need took a lot of the time to kind of just put our arms around everybody who's coming. So I won't read them all to you, but they're certainly available for your reference, and if you have any particular questions. It was certainly interesting to get everybody in the room and start counting heads and figuring out if we had synergy or if we needed to double count things. So I'll just scroll past those quickly. So I will get to the bubble diagram now. So it might be a little easier to read on your print copy as it is a large building, but for those who might not be familiar, this is the existing Greenville Park Elementary School that would be converted for this. So the main entry, you can see the 4 columns of the canopy in the lower right-hand corner of the drawing here. So the intent is that the second set of vestibule doors would be moved back, both to create a larger vestibule for waiting, as well as to allow for the appropriate relationships for a secure vestibule so that people could enter to the left into that reception area and be screened before being let into the rest of the building. Similarly, at that same entry, access to the community education ABE classrooms to the right. So there's 2 classrooms right up front at that building. And so you can see, I think we have a zoom in on the next slide of that area in particular, but access to 2 classrooms, one for 12 to 16 people and one for 20, access to a small computer lab. They have some office space needs, and then a space for testing as well, as they might have people dropping in to do testing to get certifications and things like that. So that's kind of at the main entry. You'll also notice a couple little dashed lines across the hallway, so those represent your lockdown doors. So there was some priority about what spaces people can and can't access at different times of day, especially with the population in this building. Right also at this main entry area is the current staff lounge is proposed to be the CAC, the Community Action Center, so some access to food shelf materials or other supplies in that kind of community lobby area there. The existing cafeteria will certainly be used for eating for those who are here all day, and then the gymnasium will be used for large motor activities as well as before and after school activities, the same way many of your gyms are. So then if we move into the behind the lockdown doors side of the diagram, you can see that the diagram is color-coded by program. So all of those more complicated space needs on the previous slides might explain some of the adjacencies, but to hit the highlights, the dark green color at the bottom of the diagram at the south is the ECFE programming. So they have a sibling care room and a screening room. There's the infant toddler room. There's a parent education room and a preschool room. And then on the other side of the hallway is some of their some office space for their staff. Also shown here is that parent lounge. So right after people would move through the secure reception area, they would enter into the parent lounge, which will be adjacent to the media center, which the core planning group envisioned as being an indoor play place of sorts. So a space for before and after casual conversations, maybe to have a large meeting. Obviously, it's a huge asset to this building. As well as having access to a big conference room near that main entrance. So the classroom, if you were to take a left out of the office, at the very bottom is labeled big conference room. Continuing to move around the diagram clockwise, the intent is for the doors that are between the light blue and the dark green to be the doors that early ventures parents can come and go from. So that's where the fingerprint reader would be. There's access to parking all along that existing drop-off area. So along the left-hand side of the diagram, that is west, you can see that there are 4 classrooms for hand-in-hand preschool. Essential that those rooms have access to bathrooms. So those are shown in those first floor. And then early ventures. So there's early ventures, the OT means older toddler. And then it's 2 years before preschool and 1 year before preschool. So not important to prioritize rooms with bathrooms for the infants and young toddlers as they are changed. But as they get into the 3 and 4 years old, needing access to those facilities nearby. In the center of the diagram in kind of the fuchsia color, you can see the early childhood special education classrooms. So there's 2 enclosed rooms there, with those access to some resources around that, the speech, a calming room, and then there's a larger bathroom that can support changing. And then continuing on to the top of the diagram, there's space for the ECSE staff open office. So there's some traveling staff or staff that might do push-in activities that will office out of here. And then you can see there's a room that's 2-toned, so it's kind of fuchsia and light blue, and it says ECSE and hand-in-hand motor space. So having access to a motor space in direct proximity to their classrooms was important, especially if there's an activity in the gym. And then last but not least, the rest of the early ventures programming. So the current music room being proposed to become the infant room, as it's an acoustically separated space. And then the young toddlers room and the current art room. Again, an acoustically separated space for those younger students. What else we got going on here? There's some small offices right off the gym, some drop-in offices. And then last but not least, there's another music band space at the very right-hand side of the diagram that's proposed to become the staff lounge. That's a lot to go. There's also lots of little offices and who might be in those, which we did work carefully with Erin and the rest of the core planning team. And I'm sure before the day is done, some of those might move around too as we get into user groups. But I think the core planning group worked really hard to figure out all these adjacencies. And I don't know if there's any other comments or questions at this time.
Board members, questions, comments?
Lots of you were on the core planning group. If you had any comments or questions.
So you're going to have adults and kids in the building. Are the bathrooms separated such that adults would be, they're not going to go in where the little kids are?
Yes. So actually that's a great segue to my next slide that I should have gone to. So we are zooming into the main entry here. So there's kind of 2 answers to your question. So first is people coming for community education or adult basic education or access to the CAC, which is the pink at the top here. The intent is to keep the 2 bathrooms here that are labeled toilet accessible for people who are using those classes. So we need to make sure that they have bathrooms to use. People coming to the gym at night need to be able to use those bathrooms. The bathrooms within the hand-in-hand and early ventures rooms will be renovated to be at age-appropriate height. And then we have not yet come to a decision on the bathrooms that are on the north side by the early ventures infants, what fixture height is most appropriate for those. And then there are 2 small bathrooms that are the current staff bathrooms right by the media center. They're currently adult height, single use, unisex, and I think given families coming and going, those are of high priority to keep. But it is interesting with the widespread of ages of what's the best height to keep things at. So.
And I think the lockdown line, could you just point out the lockdown line?
Sure. Do you mind if I go over and gesture?
Do,
okay. So the intent is so that, obviously you can lock the vestibule here, but the intent is that at the cafeteria and gym door, that this area can be secured separately from the rest of the building. So you'll always be able to exit out of the cafeteria, but the doors going into the cafeteria and into the gym will have card readers added, so that as people go to the restroom, they don't have access to the rest of the building. And that was kind of a watershed moment for the core planning group, is how do we have all these programs here and keep everybody safe if we're not going to ask everybody to get screened. So,
Great question. Jeff?
yes.
Yeah, my question was on security again, too. And
Okay.
One of the nice things about that school is it doesn't have a lot of doors. So, and I'm very familiar with that because I went to school there, too. But the front end, I mean, as far as lockdown, what are you saying as far as, I mean, emergency situations and things like that? As far, I mean, a lot of that we've got necessarily set up, but I mean, how secure a building is it really?
Sure. So the improvements, I think I'm going to switch to the next slide. So the improvements will be that people are screened before they're into the rest of the building and by a person and not by a video camera, which I think is always better to have that person-to-person interaction. So the proposal, you may or may not have noticed, there's actually where the big long arrow is leading towards Parent Lounge. That's actually where a medium-sized conference room is right now. But the idea is that to create space for people to come in, check in, they might have baby carriers with them or a stroller, to have some circulation space so people are screened before they're let into the building. So before they get on the other side of that lockdown line, they have to be checked in. Talked a lot about securing at that gym and cafeteria level. And then for those who may not be familiar, it sounds like you probably are, but this building actually has a significant number of additional exits. So at the back of each one of these classroom pods, you can see there's a little door to the outside. So people can get safely outside the building if there was an incident without coming back into the center of the building. Certainly it's more doors to monitor as well, but trying to think what other conversations the core planning group had about security.
I think the key thing is that if you look at what would be the southwest side of the building, that early ventures entrance, so for people dropping their children off at the child care center early in the morning, they'll be able to use that entrance again. It'd be a controlled entryway, so we can separate the people who have paid for child care dropping their kids off through that entryway, the general public coming through the traditional entryway, and again with the advanced screening and the multiple lockdown points before you can get into the rest of the building. But one of our core planning criteria or guiding principles is safe and welcoming. We also have people coming to the building who have not maybe had a great experience in school before. They're coming for adult basic education, trying to pursue their GED. So we're balancing that piece around saying, okay, we want, all the kids, the small kids, to make sure we're very safe and secure while also maintaining a welcoming area for families so they're not feeling like they're, entering into a lockdown facility, and then being really welcoming to those people who want to come for expanding their education or enhancing it through adult basic ed or community ed programs. So I think that's where you see on the right-hand side, there's a lobby, there's an intentional space for folks to wait, but yet it's separated from the rest of the paying people, the preschool and all that kind of stuff, and the rest of the building. And so we think with this open concept that we've been dealt, we've got about as good as you can probably get with the renovation, and yet balancing that safe and welcoming. So there's multiple spots. And Erin, would you just want to talk about the work that you did from the ventures perspective in terms of how satisfied you are with how we have landed on the secure yet welcoming?
Sure. So one thing also, just to your point, is there will be some doors there, not doors that make it closed off, but 2-year-olds are fast and they are mobile. And so there will be, each room will have some sort of, we'll call it a door, whatever it looks like, that kind of blocks so that children are not able to go in and out. So just as we currently do at Longfellow, where families enter with a fingerprint reader, that is what we will have on the building and the entrance that we're talking about, that we're pointing at. So that will be no different than what families are used to and will be welcoming, just like it currently is. And yet we have talked just for ease of traffic to potentially having some of our staff that would greet hand-in-hand families as they come in, and so no longer making them necessarily park and drop off and walk in with their other couple of children, but to be able to pull up because the curbs parking is right there, that we would be able to have staff that could potentially come out, greet their child. Think of how Lee Murray does this at Bridgewater, is kind of that sort of model to be able to get them in.
A concierge service. Working title.
And then for our ECFE families or other that would come in through the front entrance, again, having those classrooms close so that it is not a far walk for them. ECFE and screening are also our programs that tend to happen on weekends, and so also being conscientious about locating them on an end of the building that is near entrances, so that they can easily get in and out and not have to find a program in the building if they're not as familiar with the building.
Ellen?
So first I wanted to thank you, Sal, because having sat in on the New Greenville Park, I can imagine, as you're taking us through these, what all the decisions that have gone into this. So I'm also really pleased that I was thinking about the aspirational piece when we were having the community meetings and thinking about situating the adult basic ed and seeing the CAC here and having the finger part reader over at hand in hand. It's really lovely to see this in plan. So my next question is, this is our best guess with these wonderful set of people as to what we might need. It seems like early childhood is going to be an area of focus well into the future, and we've seen that with Hope's report. So how flexible is this? Like, I see everything filled up with nice labels. What if in 3-4 years, I mean, we're always trying to think about that, and with the elementary buildings and, our standard buildings, it's a little bit easier to think about. This one, I just have no idea, and we had great people at the table that were probably thinking of this, but.
Sure, so I might ask for your help in just a second too, but
Yep.
this diagram does reflect one room of growth in both Early Ventures and Hand in Hand already. So I think the idea is, you know that once you have the space that program will get filled. So you currently use 3 rooms for Hand in Hand, so we're showing a 4th here. And there is an additional Early Ventures room, is the room that does not have a label of, older toddler or something like that. So some thought to that, as well as there's a couple rooms you'll actually notice don't actually have a label on them yet. And I'm sure you won't let them sit empty, and we might find a use for them in user groups, but an acknowledgement that those programs are growing and there are wait lists. I don't know what other thoughts you have.
Yeah,
here.
and the only, I would mention the pink room on the bottom that it says AmeriCorps, that room would be housing about 3 people right now. So there are some things that we have placed in here that are not necessarily in need of that much space, but so there would be some, in addition to what Sal is saying, that we've put in as growth, so rooms that are marked right now that would not actually be used the day we open the doors. We do have other spaces in here that are going to be roomier than we've ever known before. So,
And just to be clear too, we plan to maintain the existing programming for the first year that we are in this site, simply because of the tight time frame at the end of August. And a thing people don't really quite understand is the Early Ventures program is governed by DHS, the Department of Human Services, in terms of the licensing, and there's some very specific pieces around licensing. And the amount of time we're going to be able to shut down the program at Longfield to transition it to the new building is probably even longer than Aaron wants, but it's already pretty short. And so thinking that we want to make sure that we get into the building, we use it and get used to it to learn how does the space really work. We're just going to take a little bit of time before we start expanding the programming so everyone knows where they're at in the new digs, to make sure that they feel that the adjacencies that we felt were appropriate during bubble diagramming actually play out like they were going to. So we still have the long-term plan of expanding, but we're just going to, because we're going to be getting so close to the beginning of the school year, set it, see how the year works, and then be very intentional about the growth as we move forward. We also are looking at a little bit larger of an infant room, which we talked about. So would you talk about that, because that's an important part of the growth?
Yeah, so the infant room is larger, and I believe you're dictated by square footage on how many infants you're allowed to have in that room. So the intent is to be able to increase that by 2 or 3 infants.
potentially up to 4.
Yeah.
So one thing is, when we think about growth for Early Ventures, if we start a child at 6 weeks old, we likely have that child till they enter kindergarten unless they move. We see very, very few people ever choose to leave us as a child care center. So what that creates is a domino effect, right? So if we take more infants, we need slots for all the way that that child would grow. And so we're trying to plan growth. The rooms that we have, the infant and young toddler right now, are rooms that have 4 walls and are a little more soundproof, just because those are rooms that...
A little bigger too.
Little bigger, yep. So we have put those in rooms so just that growth can happen in the rooms that they're currently existing in would be our goal.
Great questions. Amy?
Well, thank you, Sal, for all the work you do. And I was on the planning committee, and I have to say the last half an hour of the last meeting was a bit of a whirlwind as everything was falling into place. And
That's a nice way to describe it.
And you managed to remember it all and make it all happen. And I want to say, as I've been thinking since that last meeting, I'm getting more and more excited about the indoor play place. Because I think about how much of the school year happens during cold weather. And I remember back to having young children, 1, 2, 3-year-old children, and taking them out to the swings in the snow or something. You get about 5 minutes out of it. So I think that's going to be a real community space. And how we use that, the students and their parents will be there. But I'm just very excited about having that available for these young kids to give them a chance to grow and learn and jump and run and whatever we can do with that. So
It's a beautiful feature of the existing buildings, that central space. Yeah.
thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
No.
It's my presumption that most of those new spaces are going to have permanent walls.
Most of the colored spaces are going to have permanent walls?
Yeah.
No. So the spaces that currently have permanent walls, so all along the west-hand side, all of those rooms have permanent walls. The early venture infant room and the young toddler room and the staff dining, and then obviously the gym and the cafeteria currently have walls. Already lost the clicker. These 2 rooms have permanent walls, but these 4 pod areas are not intended to be fully subdivided with permanent walls for a couple reasons. The mechanical system was never designed to be subdivided, so if you chose to subdivide it now, you would really have to completely redo it.
My next question.
Okay, which would be on an order of magnitude that the referendum budget can't support. So the plan is to convert the building from steam to hot water at this time, and that's planned to be supplemented with long-term facility maintenance funding. But the intent is for the, let's say the open concept of these 4 pods to remain, which was a big discussion at the core planning group level, is what really needs to be bounded by 4 walls that go all the way up to the roof deck and what doesn't have to be. So we spent probably the most time on that above anything else. Access to bathrooms and access to enclosed spaces.
Yes, no.
May I
Yes.
ask another question?
Yes?
With that in mind, how many air handlers are on the roof? Like 4?
I think there are 3 or 4 in the building. Yep.
And who will have the thermostats?
Who will have the thermostats? I believe there is 1 per pod currently, is how your control system is set up. And then these rooms over here have individual control. And then there's, I believe the media center is its own zone as well.
So if they have individual controls, then there would be zones for each one of those rooms?
For each one of these rooms here.
Along the west wall?
The rooms that have walls have VAV boxes and they have individual control currently, and that would stay.
Okay.
Providing that dividing up the rooms that are not currently divided would just go beyond the budget of the referendum.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Nice presentation.
And I think, thank you. I think people are comfortable, if I can speak for the core group, I think people are comfortable with where we landed on that. It was a hot topic, to say the least.
Good choice of words.
Or cold topic, maybe.
Tom, we have a question.
So the teacher in the upper left room at the current Greenbelt complains that in the winter when the kids are in and out that door, the cold air comes right in the room. So down at the bottom where they're coming in,
Right here.
right there, will there be any separation or any prevention?
Certainly could add a vestibule, and actually we might be required to by code. So anything you consider a main entry, they make us have a second set of doors to for energy purposes. So it's quite likely we'll be required to.
There is one there. There is a vestibule down
Yeah,
there.
at the southwest corner.
But there's not at the northwest
Not at the
corner.
north. But we think that the traffic out of there will, well, it will be probably more limited than what it is now and more organized. So when people are going to the playground out
Straight out
by it would be the
This one.
northwest exit.
It might be something we want to explore though.
I think there's a vestibule. Is there not a vestibule?
I don't think that there might be.
Is there? We have a resident expert?
Yeah, there is. There's vestibules on both of those.
I asked the audience and they said there is.
I only remember because our fingerprint readers work much better in vestibules versus being out in the cold. So I think we are good in both of those.
Yeah.
Our district youth council students have proven their worth time and time again, so thank you.
Thank you for coming, saving us. So before I turn over to Josh for construction updates, just want to give people kind of a picture where we're going. So, and maybe people may or may not be aware of the idea that these two projects are actually going to be in staggered construction. So I'm going to start at the bottom. So for Greenvale, the intent is to do our user group meetings in the very near future with the idea that we'll prepare contract documents at the end of the year and bid the project in very early 2020, because summer 2020 is when construction has to happen. And obviously we can't afford to take offline their current space while we're preparing their new space. So they'll stay where they are until the end of summer 2020, which is when that move Dr. Hillman reference will happen. Longfellow, from a design perspective, we're on the same timeline. So the intent is to have our user group meetings actually next week, I believe, 2 weeks. And then again, December for contract documents, bidding in early 2020. But the construction in Longfellow, for the most part, besides perhaps the parking lot, will not start until after. So it'll start in the fall and have a move-in sometimes towards the end of 2020, targeting perhaps Thanksgiving, or we're still working on that. So that's a detail for where we're going next. And then I'll let Josh take it away on the exciting stuff.
Great, thank you, Sal. I've been doing this for almost 18 years, and I continually to be amazed at how we go from marker board words to bubble diagrams to the documents that we actually build off of. So I'll dive right into the construction update, and we'll start with the Bridgewater addition and renovation. And what we've completed to date, we hit a pretty significant milestone here last week already. So we did open up the entryway into the school. Kids and staff and parents are flowing in and out of that area. We finished up some exterior concrete and asphalt and utility work. We do have one more line to run out to the northeast, but that's ongoing the rest of this week. And then we continue to put in interior finishes, paint, ceilings, and tile, and that is pretty close for this week as well. So we do have a hang up on an air handling unit, and we ordered it basically immediately after we got award, but it's not supposed to show up here for another couple more weeks. So once we have that, we'll set it, commission it, start it up, and then we can start moving people into the new space and get going on the renovation. So that's kind of what we have planned for next month. We'll complete the remaining activities and do the move, and then we'll begin the renovation work. So some exciting pictures of actually drop-off going on right there, the new addition. These doors, most of these are hung, and the casework is set. So this is on the inside of the space. More casework going in. There's the new entrance, entryway. Completed. That door to the right will be the door kind of into the space, into the office new addition area. So really lightened up coming into that building. It looks really great. So that's real quick on Bridgewater. I can keep going on Greenvale, and then we can come back to any questions you have on any of Bridgewater or the rest of the projects here. So new Greenvale Elementary, September weather was not kind to us. It rained a lot. So if I would have been given this presentation a month ago, I would have said we were probably 2.5 weeks behind schedule. We have picked a lot of that up. The foundations are going in great. The weather's been good here last week, this week, and so some significant items that we've gotten done. We did tie into the street in Lincoln Parkway there, and We've been doing the soil correction and excavating around site. If you've been by, you can see a lot of sand. The pad is coming up, and on the far east end of the project is where we're coming across with the foundations. So it's going well. That number is probably closer to 30%. Actually, today we did pour almost every day last week, I think. Yeah, every day I think we got one in. So we poured again today. And we're moving along quickly because next month we fully intend to complete the foundations because we have steel showing up November 18th. So you will start to see the structural steel to go up, and really right behind that, the precast walls for the gym is early December. So it's going to start to look like a building here real soon, and those are some big milestones for us because we need to spend a lot of the winter getting the building enclosed and getting ready for finishes. It's coming early 2020. And then next, obviously, by December 1, we fully expect to complete all of the water, the storm, and the sewer lines in and around the building. So these might not look exciting, but they're a big deal to us when you see earthwork equipment moving around with getting grades set and getting foundations going in. There's some strip footings and walls. Again, this is on the far east end of the building. That's after stripping the formwork after pours. More walls. So that's Greenvale. So it's coming along, and it's really trying to push to get out of the ground. Moving on to Sibley. So the big milestone here last week was we did award contracts, and those contracts have been out and to successful bidders. And over the next month, you'll see us mobilizing the site, putting in fencing, and getting going on the excavating for foundations. We had a good meeting this morning with Building and Grounds and Principal Sanis and Wold to go over the kind of the game plan for making access in and out of the building safe for everybody while allowing us to keep moving with construction. So I'll get to it here shortly, but we'll move the camera that was at Bridgewater, we'll move that over to Sibley, so you get to watch us build on that one as well. We do a weekly construction update. Again, Dr. Hillman puts that on the construction website. Oh, I'm sorry, Anita does. Puts that on the construction website. It's on the school page. So feel free to grab that to see what we're up to. As mentioned, we've got webcam up at Greenville Park, and then we'll get Sibley's up here shortly. So before I do that, about a month ago, we did a couple of drone flyovers of Bridgewater and Greenville. So we'll see how well this works.
It's gonna work great. Do the yellow button in the middle. There you go.
Yep.
All right, so this is Bridgewater. Again, I think we did this on September 17th or roughly in that area. So you can see really in a month they went pretty quick.
It almost looks like a cartoon when you first see it.
Our next scheduled drone flight is first week of December. So I'm hoping here in the next month's update we can show you steel going up. It'd be nice at Greenvale. All right. And then here is New Greenvale. And it's exciting for us when we see earthworking equipment moving on site. That's really just over a month ago. So it's going quite quickly.
Josh, during your presentation, you mentioned we were, a month ago, you would have said we're about 2.5. How much behind you, how much have we caught up?
I could answer at the end of the week if you're really feeling really good, but it's about a week.
Okay.
But I think we're going to grab, if we pour about every day this week, we should be right there. As far as everything after foundations, like I said, steel's on schedule, precast is on schedule, all the mechanical equipment is still on schedule. So we should be able to pick that right back up here by the end of the year. I understand Principal Richardson said the kids love the drone as well.
Yes.
That's about it. Is there any questions on construction? Sure.
Amy. So how does snow affect the construction process?
It doesn't help, but the important thing on snow and frost is to get out of the ground. If we were starting this building now, we'd be looking at, heat and cover and everything for the concrete, which obviously drives costs. You can set steel, relatively safety, unless there's a blizzard going on in snow. We can work through the roofing, the exterior skin. A lot of that activity can come with through the winter months. As part of our bid packages, we do have temporary enclosures figured in. So when they do the masonry for brick, they'll have enclosures out there with heat to keep it safe and installed, according to spec. So I would say we figure on some of those winter days as well as part of the schedule. But the more we get done now, obviously, the better it is for the overall schedule.
Is there a certain temperature which it's better for it to be warmer than? Is it above freezing better than? Yeah, I don't know. Is there,
Yeah, I mean, there's certain pieces of equipment that won't start if it's below 10 below. They just won't do it, and it's definitely not. It's progress slows or productivity slows, but like I said, a lot of those activities get done early on like this to mitigate a lot of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Tom?
So one thing people will notice is where you tied into the sewer in the road. Is that going to get paved over?
We're pushing by next week. We're trying to beat it before, the asphalt plants typically close down. Well, usually they say a week before Thanksgiving, and with Thanksgiving so late this year, it's probably going to be in the next couple weeks. So we're pushing to get that patched in. There's another patch kind of on the north side of the parking lot too that we're trying to grab as well. We don't want to go through the winter with that gravel class 5 in place.
No.
Building envelope, precast walls.
Precast walls at the gym. The rest of the exterior is structural steel studs with, brick.
It's a mixture of metal panel and brick.
A little bit of every, yeah, and then glass and glazing.
So the precast we referred to as only the gym.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then there's precast plank at the second floor level. Yep.
Other questions, comments? Thank you for this incredible presentation, and Sal, just your process of the core planning group and the music group and how that has all come together is just nothing short of masterful. And Josh, I just want to compliment you on the Greenville Park neighborhood meeting that you gave. That was really, really good. There was a dozen or so community members there, and it was really great. And your presentation was really good, and I think it put everyone there. There were no real concerns, but I think they were just really interested in what was happening, and they had some questions around, oh, how is this going to work? Just really from wanting to be more informed, which was great. And so I was thinking that I think being out and about in the community now, when people are actually seeing it, so what was reality for us on November 7th is now becoming reality for the community, because they're seeing dirt move and buildings and additions. And so it's just been really exciting how many people I've seen, oh, congratulations on Greenville and Bridgewater. And so it's just really exciting. So thank you for all that you're doing. We really, really appreciate it, and we look forward to the next time you will be here.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so that is items for discussion. No, I'm sorry. We have, what am I thinking? Oh my gosh. We have World's Best Workforce. We will welcome again Mary Grace Hansen and Hope Langston, District Assessment Coordinator, to answer now questions board members had about the World's Best Workforce annual report that was part of the public meeting just prior to our board meeting this evening. So it's an opportunity now for board members to ask questions. So are there any questions, comments? Ellen.
So I had a couple areas of question that I kind of gave Hope the heads up, because I was curious about, as we're looking at one of our more major decisions that might be coming before us, which is thinking about a later school start. So that this is what's been in my head. And then I guess my first question is related to Hope does these weekly Northfield, K-N-O-W, Northfield. Am I saying it right now this time?
You are saying it right.
Okay. And I was curious about the reflections about this week's, because it really plays off of what we're seeing in World's Best Workforce in a different way, which is looking at the pre-K gap and then thinking about the high school gap. And just curious as to what reflections, I mean, that could be really disheartening, or it could also be like, okay, we know this data, now this is where we need to go. Just wanted to kind of get your sense of that.
I did get a response from someone at the high school talking about the CCR time that's starting in November and how that's going to be used to help address some of the needs for ACT prep. We also have, with this move to short cycle PLC goals, we have a couple PLC teams working on ACT specifically. And so I think that's, I think there's more awareness. And I struggle sometimes with that when I put out the No Northfield, like how you have to balance your wins and your challenges. And but I think this building awareness about what our reality is it prompts people to make some different decisions about how they're working with kids, and that's what we want. So
Yes, absolutely.
So then my second question, in thinking about this is the later school start time, thinking through everything that was going to impact high school is what's been in my brain. And what you showed us, the attendance in reality, and that was just mind-boggling to me, which I said that to Hope, is, do we have a sense when we think about the attendance? I don't know, like we were talking about whether we have that data now, or if that's something that would be worth looking at as we think about how would a later school start time, would it have any influence on attendance? Do we have any sense of the student populations that have the particular challenges with attendance, and do we think having a later school start time might encourage it, or any data that, or I'm guessing you don't have the answer, but is there ways that we could look at data to help us make that?
I think Marnie's working really hard on understanding why there are challenges for certain kids in their attendance, and I don't have the data off the top of my head, so I don't want to speak to that and give you wrong information, but it's definitely something that they pay close attention to, although Marnie and I have talked, and really, we worry less about the kids who are absent but are doing fine academically, because sometimes it is that they went on a trip and then they were sick, and she's really honing in on the kids who are having attendance issues and are struggling academically. So I think we could get that information to you. I just don't feel ready to give it to you tonight, but I think it's definitely a question worth pursuing, so.
Amy?
I have two questions. I think the first one's just an easy one. I noticed that Glen Lake Elementary School was a peer both of Bridgewater and of Sibley, but there were no other similar peers, and I'm wondering how.
So when they did the statistical analysis, they had to weight those challenged demographic groups, and interestingly enough, Sibley has a higher EL population than Bridgewater does, but Bridgewater has a slightly higher FRP population. And so when they went out and did the sweep across the state, that school actually came, there's a couple overlaps, Farmington Elementary overlaps, and then this one as well.
Thank you. And then my second question is about the challenged groups. Are their numbers pretty consistent from year to year? Or, because I'm just thinking how that would affect.
At the elementary level?
I think mostly at the elementary level, but even if you have a different answer for the older levels, because that would affect the percentages. If you affect the numerator, it affects the percentage. So I'm wondering.
Right, and when they did that peer group analysis, they actually had looked at several years worth of challenge. But I mean, it's probably worth revisiting every few years with the Carleton Stats team just to see if demographics have changed dramatically enough to shift that peer group. But in terms of our population, we stay fairly similar. FRP has fluctuated a little bit, where we're seeing an increase. Sibley is seeing more of an increase in their EL population. Bridgewater stays relatively stable in EL. And Greenville actually has seen a slight reduction in their EL population. And of course, the ALC has seen an increase. But as a district, when we combine them all, we're pretty stable the last few years.
Thank you. Tom.
Sorry. So the third grade is sort of the benchmark for reading. Is that, by then, are most kids reading disabilities identified, and things like dyslexia that I do pay attention to, and support structures put in place by then?
And even before. You want to speak to that? Sure. Sure. Yes, we have, the early childhood program, the screening program, which identifies children at ages 3 and 4 for any potential delays. And then we have special ed all the way through too that can identify kids. And we have Title I at Bridgewater and Greenville Park, and we have Reading Corps, and we have the ADSIS program to help those children that are struggling.
Mary, would you just briefly talk about the screening that we're doing using the MAP assessment, and then the SIPS program?
Sure. Are you talking about dyslexia?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty, that helps. We are starting, as required by statute, to identify kids who may be at risk for dyslexia. So what we had children do, we had 1,300 responses in the 3 elementary schools with the parent questionnaire about 5 risk factors for dyslexia, and we will compare that with their MAP scores so that children who are scoring below grade level in MAP and have identified risk factors, we will notify parents that their children may be at risk for dyslexia. We also have some things in place that we can help them with. We have 2 teachers trained in Orton-Gillingham, which is a response to dyslexia, one at Bridgewater and one at Greenville Park. And we have 4 teachers trained in the Sunday system, which is very similar to the Orton-Gillingham system. And we have the SIPS program for intensive intervention, which is a component of our collaborative classroom curriculum that can be used, and that can be used in grades kindergarten through grade 12. They have a grade 4 through 12 component too.
Excellent. Other questions, comments? Oh,
So you track white kids and
Sounds like a data question.
and Hispanic, but you don't like Asians or African Americans or other subgroups because they're too small. But could you get that data? I mean,
We have that data. It's just at any given grade level, that cell size is so small that it would make it possible to identify who those students are. So we tend to follow what the state guidelines, MDE's guidelines are for cell suppression. And so when you'll see some of my presentations, it will be Hispanic and then other students of color, just to group them all together. But the other demographic populations also don't look like the demographic populations. Like for black kids in this state, demographic looks different than our profile. And so we do have access to it. We just don't tend to publicize it because of that cell size.
I guess the reason I ask is because they aren't white. Could they be adversely affected because of that? And so you can identify the Hispanics, that's a big group, and the whites, but then you have the other minorities who may be impacted by the fact that they're a minority, even though it's a smaller subset, and that could affect them through their academic year.
Yes, and so at the elementary school, one of the things that each school does is that they build a composite, and so when they're looking to see which kids need which supports or enrichment, then it's a weighted scoring of all the data points that are collected in the fall. So they're truly looking at every student, even though I'm not reporting it necessarily if that group size is too small.
great. Other questions, comments? Well, thank you. I mean, there's just so many wonderful wins here, and just really such a great report. And I know you acknowledge the work of Northfield Forward in helping this be put together. And I was part of Northfield. Both Tom and I were part of Northfield Forward, and just the presentation is just really well done. And one thing I did want to talk about, the attendance goal at the high school, and Marnie Thompson, our assistant principal at the high school, is really excited about that goal. And I had the fortunate chance to sit with her in our small group, and she does feel like it's really going to be very helpful to be able to have, when you talk about building awareness, and we always have the luxury of some great district youth council students at that meeting, and they had some really good input on that. And so I think, just maybe some different services and some things that can result after having, as a result of those conversations. So it's really great to see that benchmark being put there. So thank you for all your work. And last, but certainly not a surprise to anyone, the group Northfield Forward, extremely complimentary to Mary Grace and Hope, of course, for not only putting this together, but the passion and the real stories you have behind the numbers. So thank you so much for all your work and for the amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So our last item now for discussion and report, Dr. Hillman will be presenting District Services Survey results from fall of 2019. Those results, as you know, are in your packets. Welcome, Dr. Hillman.
Yes. It's good to be welcomed. So last month I came to you and shared with you a little bit more about our partnership with Studer Education and the work that we're doing to systemize continuous improvement. As you know, we've talked about continuous improvement for a long time, and there were a lot of things that we did that were very continuous improvement-like, but they were what I would call pockets of excellence, and it wasn't a true across-the-board system. And so during that presentation I shared with you, we are using a series of 3 different survey tools as part of our continuous improvement process. And I'm going to share with you the fall results of the district services survey tonight. So this is the slide that we use now to start every data rollout. We call this a results rollout presentation. And we are absolutely unequivocally committed to continuous improvement. Anyone who knows me, that what's one of the last questions I always ask you? Is there anything I can be doing better for you? Is there anything we can be doing better? Because we are always happy to take the wins, but we're always then saying, what's next? And when we think about continuous improvement, and not just talking about it, but a true soul of continuous improvement, we know that that's best for kids, right? Because you just heard a great presentation that celebrated the wins, but said, here are our next targets. And I think that you're starting to see that everywhere, including our professional learning communities on a more rapid basis. We know what's best for employees. We employ more than 500 people, and every single one of those persons has an important role in serving kids and our community, our taxpayers, and our other stakeholders. It is responsible to the community to make sure that we are identifying metrics that we think are important, making sure that we measure how we're doing against those metrics, and then work hard to get better at it. And we just say it is how we perform every day. We are always looking at it. And hopefully the presentations you have seen so far this year, you're noticing that spirit of continuous improvement. So in our work with Studer Education, these are Quinn Studer's 9 principles in terms of when he has studied highly successful organizations with a customer service focus, these 9 principles, and I've shared them with you before. Tonight we're going to really talk about some things about commitment to excellence, measuring the important things, building a culture of service. I would argue that we'd be looking at employee engagement, individual accountability, aligning behaviors, values, and goals. And so those are several of the principles that the district services survey focuses on. This is a slide that I share during the district services results rollout because we don't make excuses. On the left-hand side of this slide are what reactive departments or organizations do. They kill the messenger. They blame the data. They say, this is not my fault. They say, I can't believe people think I'm this bad. Oh, people just don't understand. Oh, if it's somebody else's unhappy, that's their choice. I can't control that. This is the blaming, if you will, piece around when we get data that we don't necessarily like. But proactive departments embrace the data. We look at holding up the mirror to ourselves. We are not afraid of the results. We always look at data as an opportunity to improve our leadership skills. We continually say, we've had some wins, but we can always get better. We know that working as a team improves satisfaction. And then we all have to understand that perception is reality. And so if we are working on fixing perceptions and processes, we know that's going to improve satisfaction of district services. So the District Support Services Survey measures 5 characteristics, and the definitions that are on the screen are the ones that the survey participants are shared with at the beginning of the survey. Accessibility, accuracy, attitude, operations, and timeliness. It's also really important to tell you who we surveyed. We look at the people who work most closely on a daily basis with our 13 different level district departments. Now, when you hear district level departments, you might think, well, that's a lot of people. Hope Langston is a department of 1. She might seem like 10 people, but she really is a department of 1. So it ranges from something like our transportation services that we outsource to Benjamin Bus, to Hope Langston's assessment department, to the superintendent's office that includes both Anita and I, to the custodial, the buildings and grounds department, which of people, of course, are looking across the entire system for that. So in this particular case, what we did is we surveyed all of our building level administrators, so that's principals, assistant principals, ALC director, activities director. We surveyed all of our district level department leaders as peer reviewers. And so, for example, when Finance Director Val Murdistor filled out her survey, she rated everybody else except for the finance department. And then we also expanded it to all administrative assistants in the district, because all the administrative assistants work closely with our district office to make sure that things are running well. And those are really a lot of the interactions that happen where we really think we have some of the best view of how the district services run on a day-to-day basis. So with that, there were 39 responses. This, of course, is our smallest of the 3 surveys. Our overall mean was 4.55 out of 5, with a 63.74% top box survey. And this top box piece is really important because that's the number of people, that's the percentage of people who gave us the highest rating possible, which in this survey is a 5. And so we look at that, what percentage of people are giving us the highest rating in that category. And the overall mean is across all of the surveys and all 5 of the indicators. Our top 3 areas, I'm thrilled to report that attitude was the top at 4.71, and of course, anything that I have a chance to lead, we're going to have a good attitude, darn it, right? And but almost 75, well, a little more than 75% of the people giving us a top score for attitude. If you think about it, when you're going to work and you're working with a central office, if the people have a good attitude and are willing to work with you, that immediately creates relationships, doesn't it? Which is really important. It's good to be accurate, right? And I think you all have come to a trust that we are accurate. And again, a 4.56 out of a 5-point scale with 63% of people giving us the top score there. Accessibility, can I get someone when I need them? A 4.53, 64% rating that. Now when we do this rollout, I do this rollout for all of the district leaders, and then all of the district leaders do this report with their own individual departmental results to their department. And the next question we ask is why? So when we think about the areas that people rated us the most highly, why did we achieve that success? We ask this question whether it's the district services survey, whether it's the employee engagement survey, or the parent satisfaction survey. The process is the same, the questions and the respondents are different, but the process, the system, if you will, is consistent. And the reason that we ask this is we want to identify high quality practices. If we can say, wow, in accessibility, this is what we're doing to really get that high quality score. Can we leverage that and learn some of the things that we're doing in that area to cross-pollinate to a different area to make sure that our services are high quality across all 5 indicators? So we do this very robust circumstance where people get together, they list the things, we actually chart them, and then we actually capture all of those in one document, and we make sure that we share with everyone who participated. So people have a chance to provide a little context around the score. Our 2 lowest areas were operations, those are the day-to-day kinds of things, and that wasn't too shabby at 4.49 with a 58% top box score. And our lowest rated area was timeliness, which was a 4.44, 57% top box score. I'm going to share with you a little bit at the end about where these fall within the average means across all of the different Studer level partners. What Studer Education says is you are shooting for a 4.5. That's what they will tell us, is that you want your goal to be a 4.5, and once you hit a 4.5, you're going to try to maintain it to the best of your ability. It's very hard for us to compare the scores from last year to this year, because in our initial year, the advice that we got was simply to ask the building level leaders an N of 10 to provide us this feedback. So it's really hard when we basically quadrupled the number of people who participated to make a trend between one year to the other. However, I do want to share that both operations and timeliness, they were still in this slot last year, though both scores improved. And timeliness is something that all departments worked on, and there was some really great discussion. We've got a great score in accessibility, but when we have a great score in accessibility, that if we always pick up the phone, that may diminish our ability to deliver things in a timely way to how people expect. We've also talked quite a bit about what does timeliness really mean? So we've talked about those things in a number of different ways, and this is the question we use. If we were getting a 5, if it was 100% in that top box square, what would we be doing that we aren't doing now? Or what would it look like for people to rate us as a 5 in those areas? And that is the genesis for the action plan that then happens from each individual department. There are also freehand open comments for people. I shouldn't say freehand, it's free typing open comments for people. And these comments are shared with each department leader verbatim. There is no scrubbing them. They are actually just delivered verbatim. Anita took those last week and provided those to each of the department leaders. They can provide a context for the results, again, to give more specific. One of the things that we've learned is we actually need to teach our people to give high quality feedback on a survey like this, because we don't often get as specific of information that could really help us identify a strategy that would meet their needs, but we're working on that. They do provide specific areas of concern. It allows us to see what are the areas of concern. We also look for guiding areas for focusing of improvement. And then one of the most positive things that we've had in the entire program, and that showing gratitude principle, is around recognizing individuals named in positive comments. So when someone is named specifically in a positive comment, that leader will talk to that person and say, I want you to know that people called you out as someone who's making a difference in our department because of X, Y, and Z. And if you talk to any of our leaders, if you talk to people who have received what we call shout outs throughout the system, this is not just with the DSS, it's something that is pervasive now. We often go to the negative, right? But when we can share with someone the difference that they made at their workplace for someone else, you always have a spring in your step, don't you, when you hear that one? Hey, I made a difference for somebody. I cannot tell you, we all know that inherently, but the power of a well-timed phone call, an email, or even a personal note really makes a difference. And when we're lifting all boats, people are engaged to be at work, and we're doing an even better job for kids. This is the continuous improvement flywheel, really the old plan, do, study, act model, if you will. But really what we are looking right now is last year with the DSS, we acted. I coached our teams through our semi-monthly administrative meetings. Our next piece was validating and assessing, and now we're going back to that diagnose process. So our evidence-based leadership framework, this is a piece that student education looks at high-functioning organizations. I'm just going to say that we are still on the left-hand side of this. Of course, we only started this real consistent, systematic approach a year ago. We worked a lot on leadership development, which I've shared with you before. We've worked on a lot on objective measures. We are moving toward working at always actions and refining our performance management, and then looking as we continue the implementation of this mindset, right? It's really a workplace culture that we are embedding. We are going to see as we align processes that our progress will continue to accelerate over time. So the next steps that we did were department rollouts. So we have one of the 13 departments already done, and we've got 2 or 3 scheduled for this week, and they will continue over the next few weeks. They then develop an action plan, which are SMART goals and strategies that they share with me for approval. And then we are reporting results a little differently. Last year, in our first year, we didn't necessarily have a lot of internal public reporting, but what we call our DSLT Plus team, our District Services Leadership Team, every month, each department will at least share what their progress has been in the last month, and they will then do that with our broader leadership team that includes the building level administrators as well. And this board report, rolling out this data to you, is part of our next steps. So finally, I do want to just share with you the last page in your packet of the report. There is a table, and I should have put the table in the presentation, but I didn't. It's a table that has, it's called Appendix 2 Benchmark Support Characteristics Mean Percentile Ranges. So what I want to show you is that when you look at those overall across the district, so for example, 4.53 in accessibility, you'll see that that score places Northfield Public Schools among all of the, and they share the mechanism or the methodology that they've used in developing this chart in the intro, but at 4.53 we would be ranked in between the 80th and 90th percentile of school districts who are participating in this program. 4.56 in accuracy, you see, would also get us nearly to the 90th percentile. 4.71 in attitude puts us above the 90th percentile, so apparently we have a better attitude than a lot of other district offices, which I'll take any day of the week. Operations at 4.49, even with that score being in our bottom 2, we are still looking at that between the 80th and 90th percentile. And if you look at timeliness, we are between the 70th and 80th percentile in that particular area. I'm sorry, pardon me, I looked at the wrong column there. It's between the 80th and 90th percentile for that one as well. So my point to share that with you is that these are pretty good scores, but no one is saying, hey, those are great. Well, actually they are saying, wow, that was really great. But now they are taking those scores and they are creating action plans, even if they're at a very high level. They are creating an action plan of what can we do to improve the area that we are the lowest rated in. Leaders go first, We are modeling this for our building level leaders who engage in this process through the employee engagement and through the parent satisfaction survey. And then we are also modeling it, as you heard Hope say, our professional learning communities have gone to 9-week goals as opposed to semester-based goals because, again, we want to fail faster and make sure that if we know something that we're working on is not working, that we are retooling and saying, what's next? How can we keep getting better? I'm very proud of our team and how they have totally bought in to this approach. And when you see districts who are similar to us, who have been doing this for a while, it is very clear that we are on the right path in terms of providing great service to the people within the system who are relying on us to do so. And again, it's good for kids, it's good for employees, and it's responsible for the community. I'd stand for any questions that you have at this time.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, comments, board members? Ellen?
So thank you for the presentation. It was really helpful to hear your verbal narrative. Trying to make sense of this ahead of time was more difficult. I'm curious as to the actual, when the leaders, and it's nice to know that that's why it went from 10 to 39, when they're responding, are they responding thinking about all of the, like if you're the principal, are you thinking about all of your staff and what you're hearing they're saying? So, I mean, is it their perceptions of what others think are the, their accuracy, all of those pieces, as well as their own piece? And so that was I guess that's one question. And the second question is there anything on the survey that gets at how high the user need is? So I could imagine, for example, Hope is serving all of the buildings, and so you could imagine their perceptions they might have of that versus maybe teachers don't need quite as much from Val's department. I don't know. So two questions. One is just who are they answering for, and then the second is there any consideration for sort of the pervasive use of each of the different departments?
Yeah, so two great questions. So the first question, that is one of the reasons that we started with only the building level administrators last year, is that there are a couple of different ways you can look at the survey. Building principals, of course, and assistant principals and the other building level leaders that I described are looking at it from their perspective. And yes, of course, they are. One of the reasons that Studer says that's a valid way to look at it is that they believe that building administrators then are really kind of filtering all of the feedback that they have heard in addition to their personal experience. And so that's one of the almost as the voice for people forming their opinion based upon not just their interactions, but also the feedback that they have heard from people in their building. So that is one way that you look at it. The second part on that would be that I think when we really think about the people who are providing the feedback, you'll notice if you read the report, there are some departments that have more respondents than others. And so, for example, you mentioned the assessment department. You'll see in a few questions on the assessment department, there are maybe 10 less people who answered the survey because some of the administrative assistants may not have that kind of interaction with the assessment services department. But remember that when we think about the administrative assistant level and the building office level, every single department is interacting with them in some way, shape, or form. In terms of finance, actually, Val's department might have the most interaction with our administrative assistant crew because they are generating the purchase orders, they are managing that purchase process, if you will. If you think about human resources, whenever someone has an issue with their leave account or their 403B, or looking at their I mentioned their leave accounts, so they are dealing with everyone, and it depends on the time of the year, right? We're coming up to open enrollment, they will be flooded with a number of things. So buildings and grounds, obviously, every day people are interacting with them. So while I can't say that there's an equal distribution between those, I think that there's probably more interaction among the people surveyed than one might think initially.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Jeff?
Shout out to you, young man. I mean, you're a great communicator, and one of the things I appreciate in this world is that you can solve more problems with somebody in 5 minutes in person, and you understand that, and you're good at doing that. So keep up.
I haven't had anyone call me young man in a long time, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
It's a slogan, you know what I'm saying? But part of that's about creating a culture, and we want a culture of gratitude, and these Studer 9 principles are excellent. They're all good. So, thank you.
If you think about it, if any organization that you deal with, if they do those 9 things well, they're rocking it. Fortune 500 company or the corner store.
Well said, Jeff. Thank you for that remark. Amy?
First, I want to second what Jeff said. Your attitude really, I think, is reflected in how positively people responded about attitude. So you're a great leader that way. So thank you for that.
My department leads will say that my rose-colored LASIK does bleed over to them.
So I have a couple of questions. The first is 39 people responded. What was the total number that could have responded?
So I would say that I'm going to say that it was probably a little bit more than 40. So I mean, it was in that 40 to 45 range. People got a couple reminders. So we had a very high turnout.
And I've done a lot of surveys and evaluations in my life through my professional work, and I find that when you give people numbers, it tends to be really easy just to mark a number and not put the comments on, and I sort of heard that reflected in what you were saying, that you didn't get enough comments. And so I was wondering what you were thinking of doing to get more comments next time around.
So that's great. It's why the system that we're using is phenomenal, because the the open response comments can be very helpful. They can also be very, very hurtful. From time to time, you know, people are pretty straight about how they feel about something, and sometimes, you know, educators are humans, and you know, they care very much about their work. So the comments can go both ways, but we have really coached people on how to take feedback. And in fact, this last week I sent out a podcast from Janet Pilcher, the president of Studer Group, talking about how do you process feedback. And in any complaint or frustration, I teach our people to look for the request. So they're always looking for the request in the complaint, right? What does someone need that they're not getting as a result? So we coach a lot on that part. But the second part of the rollout is really important, because even if they didn't provide a comment during the rollout or during the survey, the process that we use for the rollout with a representative group of stakeholders allows for those comments, as I mentioned, both for the why did we achieve high results, and for the what would a 5 look like, right? So when I rolled my data out last week, and my lowest score, or our lowest score, I own the lowest score, and Anita gets the highest scores, that's the way it works, of operations, you know, we looked, one of the pieces of feedback was delegation. You know, so that's going to be our action plan, but that didn't necessarily come in through the comments. But when we look at that total picture, when we do the in-person results rollout where people have a chance to brainstorm what would a 5 look like, we intentionally actually get that additional feedback that would be very helpful to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
it's
makes
really
sense.
a two-prong way.
Because the comments aren't always weighted with their how serious they are. So you're finding the most important approach to improve. I would also suggest that you ask people to take the survey when they're awake and not hungry. Just an idea.
So maybe I'll start serving Subway, as Mary said, everybody gets excited, but no, we can't do that. That's not appropriate, so.
Yes, you don't want the hangry responses. Other questions, comments? Great questions and comments.
Well, and he's gone now, but I really wish Zach was still here, because I just do want to thank Zach and the Healthy Community Initiative, because they did provide, this was a chance that we took to look at saying, how can we work with an external coach? You all know how I feel about that, and consultants, and I really struggle to go with those, but through the work of HCI paying for about 2/3 of our contract with Studer Education as we got it going, almost a pilot, if you will. We have some of our own money in the game, but with HCI giving us the chance to pay for 2/3 of it, it gave us a chance to try it before we bought it, if you will. And I can tell you, in 25 years in public education, it's not even close. It is the absolute best investment for an organization that I've ever made, and I've had a chance to be part of quite a few of these kinds of discussions. So it's something I think we're getting incredible value for, and getting some really great coaching and some additional accountability, if you will. I had a call with our coach today, and by golly, when I talk to KK, I'm going to have my stuff done, because I know she will be disappointed at the other end if I don't. But that's the kind of friendly, warm demander that KK is. She is helping us with those kinds of things. So thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so that concludes our discussion and reports. Because it is the second board meeting of the month, we have a placeholder for committee reports. That's where board members are able to report on their committee work as school board liaisons to the different district committees. We did not have any of those reports. I understand it is only mid-October, so mid to late October, so many of those committees just starting back up for the school year, so we'll look forward to those in the coming board meetings. We now can move on to approval of the consent grouping. There was a personnel item and the Alpine Ski Co-op application for Red Wing Schools in the consent grouping. So is there a motion, or was in the table file, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Did I ask if anyone wanted, I didn't. I'm sorry, let me back up. Is there anything anyone wanted to pull from the consent grouping? Okay, so we do have a motion, and Anita, you have who moved it in the second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to items for individual action. We just have one this evening. We get to talk about World's Best Workforce a lot. So is there a motion to approve the 2019-20 World's Best Workforce Annual Report as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Any final questions or comments on World's Best Workforce? Okay, no? So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. It is approved. All right, items for information. We have the long-awaited and much anticipated enrollment options report. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so you know that actually normally you don't get this report until November. Christine Nessett in our Student Information Office is very efficient, and she was able to get us the report this year early. And so just so you know, Val also provided me, we have a historical report that I just didn't have in time, and so it does provide a little bit of a different level of detail for looking at the history of our enrollment options, and we'll send that out to you tomorrow so you can look at that different report. So what you'll see is that in 2019-20, we had 419 Northfield Public Schools students who are attending our schools from other schools this year compared to 403 last year. So we are up by 16 students who are coming to Northfield from other districts. 792 Northfield students are attending school elsewhere. That includes 227 students doing traditional open enrollment to other public schools, 262 students to charter schools, 150 students being homeschooled, and 153 resident students attending non-public schools. And that is up from approximately 780 last year. So you'll see we were up by about 16 students in terms of what we brought in. We were up by about 12 students for those who are going out, a difference of approximately, so a net increase of about 4 over last year. You'll see in the report just where students are going, and you've seen this version for some time, and that more streamlined spreadsheet version is a little bit easier to read, but you will see that we've seen an increase in homeschool students this year from 137 last year to 150 this year. You will see that we are down in terms of students going to charter schools from last year to this year, 16 less students choosing charter schools than the previous year. You will see that there's an increase of 8 students going from Northfield Public Schools to a non-public school. On the next sheet, I just want to point out one piece at the top. On the left-hand side of that column that has the long list of public school districts, it says out, and we just inadvertently missed the word in on the right-hand side, though I'm fairly certain you figured that out. But you will just see we do have some variation from year to year, and you know there's as many stories as to why people make a change as there are kids. And so to say that there's one specific trend for a number of these different schools, I also want to point out that you'll see from time to time that there's one that just doesn't make sense to you. So for example, you know, someone might reasonably ask, geez, why did we, have a student who is, going out to Anoka Heaven. That's quite a distance. Or you've seen some others over time that are quite Minneapolis or the Northeast Metro. Oftentimes, these are when a student has been placed, a special education student who has been placed in a specific program, or it could be a student who is accessing some kind of chemical health or mental health treatment to where they are going to that facility, and then what happens is they open enroll to that district so that they are able to gain their education from that system. So it depends on the student, it depends on the circumstances. So just when you see an outlier like that, almost always that is the reason for it. Once in a while you'll also see it, especially when you're open enrolling in, when there might be a student from a family where the parents are divorced, or there might be some custody at one point, but the student is coming to school here. So again, all of those are different circumstances, and we just make sure that we've done the appropriate paperwork so that the funding from the state is able to follow the student to where they need to be. So again, you'd like to be able to say there's some clear trends, and from time to time you can look at it and say that there are some circumstances where we might be able to say that. But in general, we saw a net increase of 4 students coming in and going out last year, but I still want to point out that we bring in 419 students from other school districts through open enrollment, but we have 792 students attending something else who are district students. So when you do the math, we aren't even coming close to making up a little bit more than half, or about 60% or so of students who are choosing something else. When we look at the charter schools, what I want to say is that we are their authorizer, right? We believe wholeheartedly in our 2 local charter schools. Our local parochial school, St. Dominic's School, we have a long, wonderful relationship with them where their students have access to our programming over the years. So in a lot of districts where the school district and the local parochial school or the charter schools are at loggerheads, that is just not the case here. We have very positive relationships and share a lot of services with all 3 of those entities. So just looking at the numbers doesn't necessarily always tell the entire story, and I think when we really dig into it, we see that we're very proud of the work that our charter schools have done. We've been very proud of our relationship with St. Dominic, and when we look at apples to apples, people who are choosing other traditional public schools versus us, we bring in almost 200 more, a little bit less than 200 more than are going out, and so I think that that's an important part to share as well. So there you go for your reading pleasure, the 2019-20 Enrollment Options Report.
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, of the 780 students, how many total students could there have been, and what percent of the total is that 780? If you know what I'm asking.
So I think I do. So I'm going to do some back of the napkin math here, so I hope that that's okay. So I would say if you added the 792 students who are choosing something else to our 4,000, well, I'll say I'm going to have to take the net, right? Because there'd be an additional 792, so that would take the total up to about 4,800 roughly. Then what you would do is you would subtract the 419, so about 4,400. Is that roughly? I mean, the total would be about, because I'd have to take that out of the 4th. Can I do that math not in front of people and on camera?
We can reduce around numbers.
But what I would do is we would say that we would subtract from the 4,000 students that we have right now, the 419 students who are, Val, if you can check my math as I'm going along here.
Are you asking of our resident students, what percentage go out?
No, more of the potential students we could have had if everybody went to the Northfield school.
So that is the question.
If all of our resident students plus are open enrolled?
No, I think just talking about just our resident students.
Okay, that's what I thought you were getting at, so I'm pulling the report here so that I can give you an actual number.
792 minus 225. Because of school charter.
While Val's doing that, can I ask a different
yes,
question?
well, I was going to start playing the Jeopardy music while Val was calculating.
So I'm just wondering if it's a common situation where school districts, because of homeschooling, private schools, and charter schools, tend to have more students go out of the district, if you want to call it that, than coming into the district.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any way to indicate why students choose to leave or go into a district. I think so much of it is regional. And so, for example, if I'm in the metro area, I could be a resident in a very large suburban district, yet have numerous options just through open enrollment, not even going to charter or parochial. So I think the key thing is that there hasn't been a high-quality study that I have seen done in Minnesota about how all of those things impact local districts. There are 330 school districts in the state of Minnesota. The median is less than 1,000 students, in terms of it. So if I am in southwestern Minnesota, my opportunities to do charter school or to go to, I may have a small Lutheran or Catholic school in my community, but the options to open enroll would be dependent upon which way do my parents work. Do they drop me off in the next town over on their way to work? So I don't think there's a way to say how we would compare to other places.
Thank you.
Did that give you enough time, Val?
Maybe, we'll see. So I ran just the 18-19 data because that's the most final that we have right now. And the total resident count was 4,147, roughly. So if you take 780, that's about 18% or so. So I don't know if that's the exact number you were looking for, if that gives you enough to get to the number you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions on the enrollment report? Okay. So, thank you. The couple of other items for information. As you know, we spoke at our last board meeting as well. The retired educators luncheon is right around the corner, Wednesday, October 30th. At Roussan Stafford, so I'm hopeful that everyone did RSVP at this point if they are attending, but just a reminder. And then also a reminder, the National Merit Reception is scheduled for Tuesday, November 12th at 6 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center, just off to, adjacent to our board meeting room. And so that will be prior to our board meeting. And then as Dr. Hillman mentioned, just a reminder about the bus driver appreciation breakfast tomorrow morning at 8:20 at Bridgewater Cafeteria. Future meetings, Veterans Day, as a result of Veterans Day being Monday, November 11th, our first meeting in November is Tuesday, November 12th, 7 p.m., followed by our second meeting of November on November 25th. And our first meeting in December 9th. Again, all of those meetings at 7 p.m. In the Northfield High School Media Center. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.